Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in once again. It's David Summers hosting another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. It's the story of wrestling in America as told by the stud, whose family started the profession 100 years ago. We step back into the ring, back into time with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, hanging out in the Great Smoky Mountains. All right, Stud, it seems like a little while since we talked. How's everything going?
Oh, man, it's been great. Really good. Had a most unusual evening about a week ago. That was really nice. A big change of pace, something different. We got beautiful weather here, Dave. We got some leaves turning. It's about to get gorgeous here, man.
That's awesome. That's perfect. And I know you're doing what I'm doing. We're just trying to keep the woman and the water and the lights and the phone turned on. And so far, I'm not even certain if that's working. But in the meantime, listen, congratulations, because Dinner with the Stud, that was a big deal. It looks like you had a tremendous crowd.
Oh, yeah, man. It was really a good crowd. More than I had expected. You never know what's going to happen at those events. It's something never been done, to my knowledge, by anyone.
Yeah.
And, so I didn't know really what to expect. And a lot of people turned out. And, well, I think they all had a great time, man. It was amazing. We probably stayed 30 minutes after it was all over, and fans were still there, man. It was just it was really a fun time.
Hey, that's awesome, man. That's a cool thing that I know you been wanting to do something for the fans for a long time, and I'm really glad everybody had a great time. All right, Stud, so today you're going to give us all that tremendous card, every bit of that card of Friday night, October 7th, 1977, which was a really big night, 2 world title matches, 4 championship matches in all, and an NWA non-sanctioned lights-out loser leaves Southeastern match on the end of the night. And before we get into that historic event, I want to ask you about several different things. Let's start with the Southeastern Rewind, your new YouTube channel, and the special things that you've got coming on there this week.
Oh, man, there's so many things on there now, Dave. It's pretty amazing. The new USA TV show that airs, I put one out every Sunday. We're up to number 10. And this one is a great one, man. It has a World Junior Heavyweight Championship match from 1988 on television with Nelson Royal against the second Armstrong boy that starts in wrestling, Scott Armstrong, old super kick we used to call him, because he really mastered the super kick, and one of the first wrestlers to use anything like that. So, we've got that on this USA show number 10. And these original USA shows, man, they're released in the order they were produced, and they've become extremely popular, man, around the world. A lot of people are watching them, so that's up there now. And there's another popular video from 1976 called the Southeastern Sweet Spot, and that's one from way back during the Funk days when I'm having these matches with both Terry Funk on this one, and Dory Funk Jr., both of them. And then it shows a little piece of the World Championship match at the end of it with Terry Funk and I, where Ronnie Garvin comes and gets involved, jumps off the top rope in my throat. It's basically classic Southeastern action is what this one is. They're called Southeastern Sweet Spots.
Yep.
They're on there. There's a lot happening on that YouTube channel.
Oh, no doubt, and that's still a few scars remain from some of that action, even as of today. Hey, listen, we just talked about this with that historic event that took place last week in Knoxville, the first ever live Studcast and the first dinner with a stud. Again, the fans are still raving. It was absolutely fabulous. The fact that you were able to show it live on your YouTube channel, Southeastern Rewind, made good on your promise to fans to do something special, and boom, you really did it. And the crowd, the folks that attended, again, as we said, obviously had a great time too. How do you feel about the success of such an unusual wrestling-related event?
That's a good way of describing it, David. It really is unusual, to my knowledge, and I don't think anything like that's ever been done in the history of the sport. To do something in wrestling that's never been done is pretty hard to do. Most people say everything's been done in wrestling, but I don't know that anybody's ever had one of these dinners like this. And wow, it was really good. It was a fun time, and I obviously was pleased with the fan turnout. Had about 70 people there, and my host Les Thatcher and my special guest Tom Pritchard were great. Man, they really did a good job, and I was very excited to be able to bring a Studcast portion of the show live to fans around the world on the YouTube channel. I don't know that that's been done very often either. So I'm also very happy to announce that the second half of that great 2-hour plus event, the question and answer session, I think is maybe as good or better than the actual Studcast. It's going to be on. It's on there now. Should be able to go and find that now. Everybody ought to be able to see it now.
Yeah.
And it starts out with raffling off some door prizes. And 2 or 3 of those door prizes, Dave, were, wow, they were truly amazing. They came from Cherokee Distributing. It was the Miller Beer Company in Knoxville. And they were fantastic prizes. And so that's the way it starts. So if you're looking at that and you're wondering, well, where is the question and answer? There's a few minutes there with that raffle, and then we get into the question and answer part of this. And wow, it was really good. I was very pleased with it. Fans had a great time, and some of their questions were absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, and to me, the question answer part kind of made it like a wrestling talk show. And I thought that was really cool as a part of the Studcast after the live Studcast. Now, I know the second dinner with the Stud is on its way too, and we're going to be talking about that later in the show. And I'm sure fans are like me, and they're ready to jump back into that great card for October 7th, 1977. It's you versus Harley Race for the World Heavyweight Championship, plus Tony Charles taking on Nelson Royal for the World Junior Heavyweight Championship. I'm sure this is going to be another great Studcast ride into wrestling history. So where is this Studcast taking us today, Ron?
Well, I'm going to start out, Dave, by kind of making an apology. I think a couple of episodes ago, I said that we were going to talk about in the live Studcast this subject, this big World Championship event in 1977. And I ended up kind of changing my mind because there were so many fans from East Tennessee that were involved in this one. Kind of wanted to cover the history of wrestling in East Tennessee. So I'm really glad to be back to this subject. This is really a huge, huge night. And we're going to be doing some writing into some very interesting stuff today. Starting out with today's training. We're going to talk about the unique atmosphere in buildings on the nights when you've got these big events that you've built up to for months at a time. It's just a different atmosphere in the building, in the lobby where people buy the tickets. It's a totally different thing than a regular event. That's a big part of today's training. We're going to hear the entire card of October 7th, 1977 again. I think we announced it on number 219. We're going to discuss the TV show that promoted it. We'll talk about the results of this championship show. We'll talk about the attendance, and we're even going to talk about the gross gate in this one. A little bit, we're going to go into a little more detail on the end of this one. Our learning tree question for this one to ask, usually lots of things change after these big events. We can take a look ahead or get an idea of what and who new is coming. So can we do that? I think the gentleman asked, can we take a look ahead? And that's what we're going to do. So so that question, Dave, is really, that's kind of the questions that I love as part of this learning tree. I mean, this guy's obviously a knowledgeable fan, and he's looking forward. He wants to know what's coming, man, taking a little peek into the future, man. So we're going to try to get all that in today. We've got a lot to cover here. We're going to do the best we can to get there.
Yeah, hey, no doubt we can all relate to that because none of us can wait to get there, Stud. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so take us into the Knoxville Coliseum Friday night, October 7th of 77 on this Today's Training. And let's get an idea of the atmosphere in that building. It had to be incredible.
Well, so it is my pleasure to do that, my man. We're going to have a fun ride today. So I always enjoyed, kind of arriving early at especially the big events. And the Coliseum in Knoxville kind of sits on a hill, big hill, and it overlooks downtown Knoxville, basically. And it has two main entrances to it for fans. And they go into this big lobby, and that's where everybody goes to purchase their tickets. And that entire side of the Knoxville Coliseum was where everybody not only bought their tickets, but that's where they entered the actual building itself. And I like to drive on these big events like this around the building once before I went in downstairs to park my car, because we had a private entrance for wrestlers. So, on these big nights, I wanted to see the incoming crowd in the lobby and where the fans were congregating and how many people were coming from the parking garages into the building. So one entrance was from the one side of the building that faced the one that's faced downtown, that entrance. Most fans, used the back entrance because it was on this big, huge outside patio, and it had parking garages were back in that area, and people had to come across the big patio. But on this night, man, they were pretty. There's a lot of people there when I got there, and I arrived about 7 o'clock, so I'm about an hour and a half before match time. And I could see from the street outside as I passed around this front entrance that the main lobby was already pretty full, at 7 o'clock, hour and a half ahead of time. And I don't think they started selling tickets till 6:30. That, is a pretty good sign that there's going to be a lot of people in the building. And the back patio, once I passed on around the building, turned the corner, I could see the back patio. And there were lines of people coming out of the parking garages and headed for the main lobby where they had to buy their tickets. And then I went on around the block, and basically I entered the Coliseum from an underground private entrance that wrestlers only used. They had guards there, and they would let you in. They recognized you, and if they didn't, they sent you somewhere else to park. And so we were down underneath the building and parked. And so obviously, once I got in the dressing room, I couldn't go back up into the lobby. I was pretty recognizable, obviously, at that point. Everybody know who I was, and that's probably not the place to be spotted before your match. But this little drive around the building for me was kind of the beginning of for me, a real emotional buildup for what was to come that night. And, and I don't know if other wrestlers ever made these trips like I did, entering after going around the building and taking a look at the lobby and all that stuff. But not many of them had the same thing at stake that I did, Dave.
Yeah.
They were just going to wrestle. I was thinking about much more than just a match. I was thinking about the fans and how well we were all going to do that night.
Yeah, I'm wondering, too, as you were kind of circling the building and checking it out, did there ever come a time in situations like this where they recognized you and go, oh, there's a Tennessee Stud, because you probably didn't have tinted windows back then? I don't know. Did that ever happen?
Oh, well, I had a Cadillac, but if I'd have been Bob Armstrong, who won that pink Cadillac that everybody recognized, that
might have stood out. Yeah.
They would have all known it was me. Okay. But they weren't aware of what my car looked like.
Okay.
So I didn't. No, I didn't have hardly anybody recognize me. It was a nice little leisurely drive around there. I drove slow, and it got me ready. got me fired up, man. And so.
Yeah, and those folks are probably kind of concentrating on getting in the building, getting to their seats, and they're not really thinking that the stud might be parking anytime now. So anyway,
Yeah.
All right, but that's a great way to start the whole Studcast right there. So you're setting the stage for what's going to be a really big night for fans and wrestlers alike, and then you're building it further with the upcoming TV show that promotes this whole event. Then the results of the matches. And plus the learning tree, and we're going to be finding out about where Southeastern was headed from this night forward. So a look into the future is ahead too. So tell us about what you think was going on in that ticket lobby in the next 90 minutes before the bell.
Well, geez, man, my first look up there was getting pretty crowded in there. And these big events, man, they kind of created their own excitement, it seemed like to me. Fans had been anticipating this for weeks and weeks. They knew at least 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months, that the world champion was coming to town. They didn't know they were going to get the second world championship match. They certainly didn't know about the other things that was on this card 6 or 8 weeks ago. But as you built toward this night, fans got more excited because you kept adding these great matches. So this was a long time, at this time back in those days, Dave, there was no Ticketmaster. There was no advanced sale outlets where you could go and buy tickets to concerts. And,
right.
This was long before those type of things. So, and you could buy tickets in advance. I had set it up pretty well. You could buy wrestling tickets in advance, 6 days a week there. Because we were so successful, because we were drawing these huge crowds, we could not afford to have everybody have to buy a ticket that night. So we got to where about 15% of the fans would take advantage of that early ticket selling day, go out, buy them on a Tuesday or a Thursday, and get that ticket and not have to spend time in the lobby to wait and get sold one. So it kind of meant that thousands of fans still, 15% is a small part of 6,000 or so.
Yeah.
So a whole lot, thousands of fans are going to walk up. They're going to stand in the long lines to buy their tickets, and they're going to finally get in. And that part of the wrestling experience in itself was kind of exciting for fans, especially when the fans knew they were late when they got there.
Yeah.
They're standing in a huge mob of people knowing that the building inside will be already packed. And they might be at any minute putting up that sign that says, sorry, sold out.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
They're not going to get in.
Right.
So, it's a big experience kind of from beginning to end. But there was a new element in this particular night that had Southeastern that I'd never experienced before. And, and I had mentioned it, and I hadn't mentioned it in a while, but this was about that Southeastern, program that Roy Lee Welch was going to develop. And this was going to be the first world title event that the program had been sold. Now, it had been sold and created and been sold for about a month or so before this event. But this was the first night for a world championship program to be sold. And this program was sold not just in Knoxville, but it was sold at every event in the territory. So, and it had debuted, like I said, a couple of months earlier. And it had become one of the most popular items in Southeastern. Man, I mean, it was inexpensive. It was full of great pictures of the stars. It had stories, back stories. It had information about always about the current night. The card was listed for you there. It had totally captivated fans. And just having this program available at an event was exciting for the fans, It was the first thing they purchased after they got through the door. A lot of them, before they bought their ticket, went and bought their program, and fans were going to take as much as an hour to read through it. They're going to take their time when they start reading the program. Every sentence of it was focused on the matches that were tonight's matches, and that perfectly set the stage for what was about to come, man. Building even more exciting, man. Every time they turned the page, these programs had something new. They had new photos, new stories. And the great thing about it was, at the end of the night, they took them home, man. They kept them as mementos.
Heck yeah.
And they were lucky. A lot of fans would get you off to the side and have the opportunity to have you sign their program.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Yeah.
It was a great addition to what Southeastern was doing, and I really realized it after this particular first World Championship match in which we sold. So basically, the entire experience, from arriving at the building to getting your program, to standing in the long lines, to buy your tickets, from reading about what was to come, and then finally, the magical moment of every wrestling event, the opening bell. And it was always, special. But on nights like this, with a card like this one, the reaction at the sound of the bell was explosive. And I mean, it like some people just sat there and waited on it, and we're going to react, but we got to wait on the bell to do it.
Yeah.
And then when you have 5,000 or 6,000 people in an arena, when that explosion comes, that bell rings and that explosion comes, I used to get those goosebumps, man, and that crowd would roar like crazy, man. And I bet I wasn't the only person that got goosebumps. I think some of those fans out there probably got it too, man. It was a beautiful part of the great sport that I was lucky enough to be born into, man.
And you know what? The exact same thing that you described that was happening in Knoxville was happening in my hometown, and the exact same situation. So what you were describing, fans all over were experiencing that when the bell rang, and so that's pretty cool, dude. You're off to a great start today. So that dinner with a stud last week has got you kind of fired up. Did you eat too much or too little? What?
I tell you what, man, the food was absolutely wonderful. Wow, everybody couldn't believe the food, man. That's what their object and their best product there at Calhoun's on the river is that roast beef. Wow, and it was really good, man.
Oh, shut up.
Good barbecue, tremendous meal, tremendous night.
Wow.
Everybody enjoyed themselves.
All right, that's awesome. And again, as we said earlier, we alluded to, we're going to be talking about that later in the show because another one of those dinner with the studs is coming. All right, so tell us about that great card Friday night, October 7th, 1977 in the sold-out Knoxville Coliseum.
All right, first match, man, we had a guy coming back that hadn't been there since 1975. He and his partner were tag team champions for quite a while there. Butch Malone, who was partners with Norvell Austin. Butch Malone came back, and he's on the first match, and he opens up against the pro, Doug Gilbert. And the pro, and then the second match, my brother, Robert Fuller, faces off with another wrestler that we hadn't seen in a while in Southeastern, Jim Dalton. The first championship match of the night was next, the Southeastern Tag Championship. Challengers Joe LeDuc, and he had a new partner, Roy Lee Welch. They were wrestling the champions, Mr. Knoxville, Ronnie Garvin, and Bob Orton Jr., along with their manager, Al Costello. And wow, Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch had formed a tremendous friendship, and this is going to be an amazing little tag team here for fans in the future. There was an event also on this card that wasn't scheduled until after the TV show that we're going to be talking about next. And I was the Southeastern champion, obviously. The week before, I'd won the tournament. I'd won the belt. And I went on TV on the Saturday before this actual show. I was the champion, and I was going to defend my belt that night in Harlan, Kentucky. And so in Harlan, Kentucky that night, the Stomper won the belt from me. And then 3 days later in Johnson City, Tennessee, he defended the belt. Because he won it, and Gigi was so confident because they were wrestling he had a match against Ricky Gibson, that nothing bad could happen in this match. And he says, my champion will defend anybody. And so he decided to make it a championship match in Johnson City. And by golly, Ricky Gibson got so close to beating the champion. There was a big controversial match, and the Southeastern officials held up the belt.
Oh.
So, 3 days before the card, I got, a no Southeastern champion, but I got these two guys that were wrestling each other on the card originally. So I just called the newspaper and I said, we're going to put another match on there. So I changed that match to a championship match. I made it a no DQ, and I said there had to be a winner for it. So we started out with just a match here. It was going to be Ricky Gibson against the Mongolian Stomper. Turns out to be a Southeastern Championship match with a whole lot at stake. Fourth match on that card was for the held up, as I said, the held up Southeastern Championship, Mongolian Stomper, Ricky Gibson, no DQ, and there had to be a winner. Then came the first world title match. Nelson Royal was defending his World Junior Heavyweight Championship against the great Tony Charles. And then the NWA World Champion, Harley Race, heavyweight champion, was defending his title and his 10 pounds of gold against me. And then the last match was scheduled in that spot because it had to be. It was a return NWA non-sanctioned lights out match between Bob Armstrong and Don Carson, which meant it had to be on last. And this time there was an even bigger stipulation added to that match. Last time it was just the lights out match. This time the loser is going to leave Southeastern.
Man, that's an awesome card. That's a fantastic card. All right, so Saturday, October 1st of 77, I'm sure that was a pretty special TV show and the one that was ready to promote one of the best cards ever for Southeastern.
Oh, man, it certainly was, man. You can imagine there's two world champions on it.
Yeah.
One of them's on there live. One of them sends a video. There's a new tag team on it that's going after the Southeastern belts. That's our first match ever together. It's got me and Harley Race on the profile, on the personality profile. It's got Tony Charles on the show. Nelson Royals on the show. Wow, it's a loaded show. The Stomper, Ricky Gibson. Wow, it's a loaded television show for sure. So, and it opens up with Les running down the great card, which is the way all shows were opening back in those days. And then that big still shot behind him was a shot of me. I had my hand in the air. I was standing over Terry Funk. He was laying there and he was holding his right leg, and he had a pretty painful look on his face for those that could see his face. And obviously, with Terry Funk laying down and crying, the TV crowd exploded as soon as the photo hit, as soon as they saw it.
Wow.
Wow. Oh, they loved it, man. So, and then I came to the set, and the fans welcomed me, and Les did too. I brought my newly won Southeastern belt and set it down in front of me, and Les congratulated me, and almost instantly, a totally different video appeared behind us. And director Bill Kincaid, he did his magic once again, man. 2-minute video. It captured everything meaningful from 3 of my matches the night before and the wins in each one of those matches. It showed me beating the Mongolian Stomper in the first round of the tournament. Then it went right to me beating the Assassin in the second round. And then it showed a piece of the Terry Funk win in which I put the Fuller leg lock on him. That earned me the shot at Harley. And also earned me the Southeastern Championship. So Les invited me back for the personality profile, and fans were going to be able to hear from the world champion Harley Race as well. So obviously we're teasing and setting up for a big show.
Yeah.
So before I got away from the set, Tony Charles popped in the studio, and he came by the desk being Tony. You know, and nobody tells Tony to do these things. It's just Tony's personality. He comes by the set. I'm sitting there with the belt, and he congratulates me for winning, and getting the shot at Harley. And, and of course, I returned the favor. I mean, he said, I wish you luck, Ron. I hope you beat him next Friday. And I said, well, the same to you, Tony. I hope you beat Nelson Royal next Friday for the World Junior title. So then Tony went on to the ring. And that made the fans even happier, man. They're going to get to see him wrestle, too. So he goes to the ring for the first match. And Tony's popularity at this point, he's on fire. I mean, fans just really, really love Tony Charles. And everybody wanted to touch him wherever he went, man. You can see these crowds in the gymnasiums all across that part of the country. They would just flock and just cover him up on the way to the ring. So he was truly a Southeastern sensation. So World Junior Heavyweight Champion Nelson Royal he's there that day, and he joins Les at the set. He's got him on a real nice suit, as he always did. I mean, he always looked like a champion, and he dressed like one. And he was about as unpopular as Tony was popular. I mean, fans didn't like Nelson. He was very, very arrogant, cocky, man, had an attitude.
Yeah.
So Tony got in his match. He did his regular thing in the match, even though he was wrestling a guy that probably weighed 50 pounds more than he did. Didn't make Tony any difference. He threw that big guy around like he was a baby. He gave him all these tosses. I mean, he just said, wow, it was crazy. And there wouldn't be these big tosses that he was doing. Les kept, complimenting Tony, as he should. And Nelson Royal sitting there with him, listening to Les compliment the guy he's going to wrestle the next Friday night for the title. And Royal gets upset. He makes it pretty obvious. Hey, what do you think this guy's that good? You never talked to me like that, because they were old buddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the match, and Tony was about to finish the match and finish his opponent off, and he had his back turned. Royal was so upset, he just charged the ring. I think he just lost control of himself, so as he stepped through the ropes, man, and he had his suit on, and Charles had just got the pin and was getting his hand raised, and obviously Tony got an eye on him coming to the ring. So as soon as Royal stepped through the ropes, he rushed at Tony, and Tony did a perfect little drop toe hold on him, man. And it sent Royal face first into the mat. Then Tony dropped both knees in Royal's back. He hooked Royal's feet into his armpits, and he grabbed Royal's hands, and he turned him over upside down, put him in one of the most painful holes in all of wrestling, called the torture rack. And it was a definite finish hold, man. And he beautifully applied it in a matter of seconds. I mean, he just whipped him into, and there's Nelson Royal. He's screaming like a baby. Now he's got his suit on, and he's being held helplessly above Charles's body. Tony's got his knees in his back. He's holding his hands. He's got his feet bent underneath him. And he held him there.
Wow.
And his body was in kind of the shape of a bow. I'm talking about a bow that you shoot arrows with, right? Yeah. He's all bowed up on top of Charles, and the studio exploded. They didn't expect this. Nobody expected this. And Roy was getting a whole lot more than just his suit wrinkled, man. His body and his ego was getting wrinkled. And he was screaming in pain. You could hear him over on Les's microphone. So it was pretty cool, man.
I know I think you did a reasonable job describing it, but I don't know that I've ever seen a hold like that. It sounds like a very embarrassing moment for a world champion. All right, so what happens next, Ron?
Well, Tony finally, he dropped him on his side, and he just crawled out of the ring. And he went to the dressing room. And, the fans are laughing like crazy. And Roy took a few seconds to compose himself. And then he kind of struggled to get on his feet. That's a very bad, horrible move, man. You get into that, there's no way out of it. It's so horrible.
Yeah. So
everyone in the studio just kept laughing at him. Boy, and of course, that's a very, very embarrassing thing for him, Dave, obviously. And that little thing that happened is going to add a lot of fuel to that Friday night match for the World Championship. That little segment there where Tony decides to let me put you in this big, this painful hold and make a fool out of you before I wrestle you for the title. So Royal went back to the set, straight to the set with Les. And Charles went on into Studio B to do the first interview. And I'd never seen Nelson Royal that man. He was just fuming. And as soon as Tony Charles appeared in the other studio, Nelson didn't wait to see who was going to talk first. He just went crazy. And right off the bat, he says, you ever do anything like that to me? I'm going to kill you, Tony Charles. And then he said, and then he kind of thought about it, I think. And he said, well, if I don't kill you in the ring, he goes, I may run over you with my car if I see you today. He was really mad, and he went on for most of the 2-minute interview. He just had this big long tirade of threat after threat after threat, man. And so about halfway through, Tony started laughing. And that made Nelson worse. He just got madder. And then when Tony started laughing, the fans in the studio started laughing. So Nelson finally got so upset, he just grabbed his world title belt that was on the desk and he headed for the dressing room. So, and Tony didn't have much time left. Nelson had taken the whole thing. So, he was very calm and he was still giggling and the crowd was still laughing. And he said, as they closed, he said, I hope you don't wear that suit in the ring next Friday. And that popped the crowd. So Tony had a good sense of humor. So before we move on, Dave, and while we're on this subject, I found the picture, man, of this hold. Mm-hmm. And it's so unusual a hold that the picture came from the same hold that Tony Charles is going to put on Nelson Royal in this championship match.
Oh, okay.
So I put a photo on my website. I do it for every Studcast. They get their own photo that has something to do with the Studcast. Mm-hmm. This photo is so unusual. This wrestling move is so unusual. Fans, you got to take a look at this. I mean, you can see it on my website if you want to at tnstud.com, or you can go to any place you pick up your Studcast, whatever platform you pick up your Studcast from. We're going to try to get this photo on there as well. So when you go to get your podcast, your Studcast, you definitely need to take a look at this torture rack, man, because it was quite a start, man, to a show.
So that's the photo that goes with today's Studcast.
That's the photo that will go with today's Studcast. If you go on TJN Stud and you click on either the Studcast or the gallery, you'll find that photo underneath the Studcast number 221. And wow, I bet make fans cringe just looking at it. It's like, wow, how can anybody do that to you?
For real. Okay. All right. I can't wait to check it out. All right. That's an awesome way to start a TV show. So what comes next, Ron?
Well, there's a new tag team combination. Like I mentioned, man, it's soon going to become a sensation, man, in Southeastern. And these two wrestlers had become very close friends. After Joe got injured and in the hospital, after the blockbusting incident, Roy visited him constantly. They became great friends. And Joe, once he got out and he got well enough and he started wrestling again, then he wanted Roy Lee. He'd had a bunch of partners. He'd had Bob Armstrong. He had Ron Wright. He'd had Tony Charles. He had a lot of different wrestlers. But he wanted to have Roy Lee Welch as his partner. And these guys they're gonna have instant success, man. It's pretty amazing. And we've talked about Roy Lee and how his first matches he had people standing up and and people just cheering him like crazy. And now he's got himself a tremendous partner, and they're going to make some history in Southeastern. So they went on to the set after they had their match. They won pretty easily. The Southeastern Tag Champions, Mr. Knoxville, Bob Orton Jr., and the manager, Al Costello, they're over there in Studio B. And Roy Lee was their focal point, obviously, especially since the Duke had so many partners in the past and had no success. They were making fun of Roy Lee. How in the heck are you going to take a first match guy and make a champion out of him, Joe the Duke?
Wow.
Are you going to carry this guy? What's the story, man? So, it was an odd combination, but it was going to prove to be a very good one.
All right, that's pretty cool. And this is a great place for a break. So let's do that. We'll take a break and come back with the personality profile. And on the way there, let's remind you to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind as well. All right, so Ron and Harley Race will both be on the personality profile, and it's coming up when this Studcast continues in a moment right here. Okay, Studcast fans, the first one was absolutely awesome. Are you looking for something different this Thanksgiving, like great food and entertainment? Want to visit the Smoky Mountains? You can do all of these things with the Tennessee Stud. His next dinner with the Stud is the night before Thanksgiving, Wednesday, November 24th, 7 to 9 p.m. Start your Thanksgiving celebration at the famous Calhoun's on the River restaurant in Knoxville, Tennessee. Free buffet barbecue dinner, 2 free 8x10 photos of Ron Fuller and his guest, great door prizes, a 1-hour live Studcast, plus a 1-hour question and answer session with the fans. All of this for only $30. 2 photos alone is a $30 value. Reserve your seat now for an unforgettable evening at tnstud.com. That's tnstud.com. Click on Stud Store and have dinner with the Stud. And have a happy Thanksgiving. All right, everybody, welcome back once again. David Summers with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, hanging out in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee as we continue with another incredible Studcast. The personality profile is just ahead. And let's mention about the success last Wednesday night in Knoxville at Calhoun's on the River. And Stud, you guys just had a fantastic time, and it was all live on YouTube, and it's still there on YouTube if anybody missed it.
Yeah, you can go to it and see it on YouTube, and there's also the second part of it on there now on YouTube. You can go and see the question and answer show. Just make sure you don't tune out when they start giving away the door prizes. I think that's pretty interesting part of it anyway. And then once that's over, you get into the questions and answers, and wow, that's another great hour on Southeastern Rewind, man, for fans that didn't get a chance to be there.
Cool deal. And you had a lot of folks there, and so it really is, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, it's kind of like a wrestling talk show that's live right there in person, right in front of your very eyes. And again, you can see both the Studcast and the follow-through question and answer session, and they're both on the Southeastern Rewind channel on YouTube, so do check it out. All right, back into the Studcast we go with the Tennessee Stud. And so how did this personality profile go down, Ron?
Well, it was a different one. I mean, obviously, I'm there live. Harley's in Hawaii at this point. Lucky for him, I guess, part of the perks of being a world champion. But I get to start it, and we're going to run Harley's interview second, and my part of it is going to go first. And I basically kind of talked about my history of wrestling against Harley Race. Harley Race was a tremendous opponent, and I had wrestled him at this point in my life 3 times. I wrestled him first in Miami in 1973, where I used to play basketball. Actually, about 3 years after stopped playing basketball, I'm wrestling the world champion in Miami, Florida. I wrestled him in St. Louis, Missouri, which is close to Harley's home, up there in Sam Muchnick territory in 1974. And I wrestled him, obviously, the preceding April in 1977 in the Coliseum and a 60-minute time limit draw before the largest crowd to ever see a sports event in the Coliseum. And that record still stands today. 44 years later, it's still the record. So, I had 3 shots at him. I talked to Les just laid it on the line, that I was ready for it. That to prove it, I'd beaten Terry Funk 3 times in 1977 already. He's the former champion, right? He's not just another wrestler. He had that belt, and I beat him 3 times, all 3 times that I'd wrestled him in 1977. I told Les I felt like it was my destiny to be the world champion. And what better place for me to win it, man, than in Knoxville, Tennessee, man, the home of the Tennessee Stud.
Yep.
So, and it was alive, and the studio got into it. They certainly liked that part of it. And then let's cut away to the interview from Hawaii. And Harley Race is standing on Waikiki. he's enjoying himself, man. and he made a very forthcoming, different type of interview from Harley, who really never put his opponent over. He really went the opposite direction with this interview. And he said something about considering me one of the top 10 opponents in the world, especially since we'd had that 1 hour draw 6 months earlier in the Coliseum in front of that huge crowd. And he said about that huge crowd, he said he couldn't believe the noise that crowd made. And the noise that it made kind of concerned him. He was making a different type of interview here. And he said, that I was young, and he says, Von Fuller's in great shape, and he's less than 30 years old, and he says he comes from one of the best wrestling families in the world, and he said that I know who he wrestled last week. I know he was in one of the biggest tournaments in the history of wrestling, one of the biggest I ever heard of. And I know he had to beat some top guys to get the shot at me. And, and he even knew the guys. He had to beat the Mongolian Stomper. He beat the world famous Assassin. And then he beat Terry Funk, So he was really, really putting me over, And, and then he even got into my family, and he said something about it. He said, I started my wrestling career for Ron Fuller's grandfather, Roy Welch, in the state of Tennessee. He goes, I learned a lot of wrestling in Tennessee.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he got down to the end of it. He did make all these accolades and all these great statements. And then he ended it by saying, but nonetheless, none of it is going to change the fact.
Here it comes.
That I'm still the baddest man on God's green earth.
That is, listen, I can see that. And listen, you may not have an answer to this, but how does Harley end up in Hawaii on Waikiki, and he's got a camera crew that documents this interview and then bicycles it back?
Oh, man, that's a long way to send an interview from, and obviously he shot this interview days before. He might have done the interview on a Monday. I don't know what day of the week it was when he was there. We're on a Saturday. My guess is he was there on maybe a weekend, a Saturday, Sunday. When you worked Hawaii, which I worked in Hawaii, you worked Honolulu and you worked Kona. You worked some small island, a smaller city on another island.
Yeah.
You usually had about 2 shots. So he might have worked on the weekend. He probably got them to send the film crew with him. He probably was going to go to the beach anyway.
Yeah.
And he's right there. He's got the film crew, and he lays that down, and then they ship it. Now, it ain't FedEx days.
Right.
So, it took a few days, no doubt, from Honolulu to Knoxville, but it made it there. The important thing was it made it there. And, it was a really great interview. Gosh, it was priceless to me as a promoter and to promoters all over the world. It was priceless to get those interviews from the world champion before he wrestles one of your hot wrestlers.
Oh, my God.
One of your major markets.
Yeah, and 2, he just legitimized this thing in a big way with a simple gesture while he was probably taking a little bit of vacation time and doing a little bit of work. But that little bit from Hawaii, said he was the baddest man on God's green earth, talking to you from the 50th state. So, and sending it back to Knoxville, that definitely upped the ante for this whole thing.
Impact. It had tremendous impact.
Oh, God, yeah.
So at that point, after that, and you see where he is, and he tells you I'm on Waikiki, and and what else could be said? It wasn't a real long profile, but gosh, it had impact. It was exactly what needed to be done. So we finished it. We went right third match, and that was with the ever improving Ricky Gibson, who was a great wrestler. I'm sure you've seen him a lot of times. and his brother, Robert Gibson. For fans that don't know it, his brother, Robert Gibson, is a part of the rock and roll. So, he comes from a good genealogy for sure for wrestling. And in just a single match, man. But as I said earlier, things were going to change dramatically in the next 4 days after this TV. It's not going to be just a singles match. So, in fact, Gorgeous George Jr. bragged about it. Gibson got himself a quick win. We went to the interview, and Gorgeous George Jr. bragged in the interview that the Stomper had a championship match against me that night in Harlan, Kentucky. Great little city for wrestling, man. They're going to have more than 3,000 people in a city that has a 3,000 population in their gym. I mean, it's going to be sold out. And in that night, and in his interview, Gorgeous George Jr., he mentions that my Stomper has a chance to win the Southeastern belt. He may not get the shot at the title, but to win the belt back. And he didn't even mention Ricky Gibson in his interview. He was so tuned in to Stomper getting his belt back. So Gigi made that statement come true that night in Harlan. And him and Stomper, between the two of them, they kind of stole the belt from him. But 3 days later, they were wrestling. He was wrestling Ricky Gibson in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I think I mentioned earlier, Gigi got to bragging to the fans, and he just said, let's just make this a championship match, because he thought that Gibson had no chance against the Stomper. And Gibson almost beat the Stomper. So all of the things that are changing here. So the bottom line was the Mongolian Stomper and Ricky Gibson were going to be in a much more important match the next Friday night than just the regular match they were talking about on TV. And I luckily had the time to have the newspaper ad changed, and I changed that match in the newspaper and on the card. So the final TV segment was big in this show. Bob Armstrong, man, he was on there. He began with Les at the desk. He was taped up, man, like he'd been in a car wreck the night before. And he joined Les to watch a really powerful match from the night before, this NWA non-sanctioned lights out match between him and Don Carson. And, and then in this video, it's going to show Bob has got Carson just beat. He's on his back. He's got his black glove partially off of his hand. He's just stomping him to pieces. And the assassin shows up from out of nowhere and gets into the ring. Bob never sees him. Assassin loads up his mask, and then he headbutts Bob in the back of the head. And he does something I'd never seen him do before. He headbutted him, and Bob started to collapse, and he grabbed him underneath the arms and turned him around and grabbed his head and headbutted him in the forehead.
Ooh.
I mean, he intended for Bob not to get up. And the video showed Bob Armstrong's then right there. Boom, and Bob didn't get up. It showed Bob Armstrong's first loss ever in an NWA non-sanctioned lights out match.
Wow.
That's what Bob said.
Yeah.
This is the first one of those I ever lost.
Wow.
And he goes, obviously, he had a good reason to lose it. He was wrestling two guys, basically. So fans got to watching it, and they got extremely upset by the video, too. And they got even more upset then when the next guy came to the ring to wrestle, because it was Don Carson. And Don was all taped up too, man. It had been a nasty match that they had. So Don ended up loading his glove and taking care of some enhancement talent, like we'll call it, on that TV show. And then he went on, to the set. Bob stayed at the set, and Carson went into Studio B. So Armstrong spent most of this interview focused on the assassin, who, as he said in the interview, had no business being in the ring, and he was definitely the reason that Carson won the match. There was no doubt about that. He'd been headbutted twice by a guy that wasn't in the match. So then Les pointed out to Bob. He said, Bob, the NWA non-sanctioned match, they're probably the most violent and unpredictable And the very fact that there's no rules is the reason for that, And, he says to Bob, basically, it's dangerous. This is a dangerous deal, And Bob said, he realized it, and he says, I know that if I lose this, I'm gone from Southeastern. But he goes, I've looked at the card. And he goes, guess who isn't on that card? And Les says, I don't know. And he says, the assassin. So, he figures he's covering his base. Okay. So then Carson's part of the interview, he bragged about he didn't need any help from anybody, much less the assassin. He said, I don't even like him. I don't know why he did that, but he says, I don't need any help from anybody to beat Bob Armstrong. And he says, next Friday night, he calls himself the Jawjacker, but he says, I'm going to be doing the Jawjacking. And Bob Armstrong's going to be history for 1 year here in Southeastern Wrestling. So 6 days later, Southeastern going to have another big crowd.
Boy, I mean, it sure does sound like it, but who am I? I'm just enhancement talent Dave Summers. All right, so you got a TV full of stars, a humiliation for a world champion, a new tag team, Harley Race full of compliments, and an upcoming showdown with one more star leaving Southeastern. So what does happen on October 7th, 1977? Bring it to life, Stud.
All right, man. Wow, this one is good. Wow, man, what a night. The pro, Doug Gilbert, I mean, he gets him a win over Butch Malone in the first match. Rob and Jim Dalton have a really good match, and the crowd starts. It's one of those nights the crowd's got to start slow, and they're going to slowly build, and because the night is going to slowly build. Then the Southeastern Championship match with the belt held up, no DQ, and there had to be a winner. The Mongolian Stomper, he regained, and he got his belt back. He had it. I beat him. He got it back from me. He almost lost it to Gibson, and he got it back again. So he and Gigi, I assume, are fairly happy after this event is over. A Mongolian Stomper gets his victory over Ricky Gibson. Then the next match is a Southeastern Tag Match. Fans got absolutely crazy for this one, man. Joe LeDuc and Roy Lee Welch they were just an awesome team. It looked like they had been together for years. I think they had spent a lot of time, which wrestlers never did, basically, down in somebody's ring, making themselves a great team, because it just didn't happen by accident. So they're on the verge of winning this match, man, at the end of it. The crowd's going crazy, and Joe LeDuc has got the bear hug on Mr. Knoxville. Roy Lee Welch has got the abdominal stretch on Bob Orton Jr., and Al Costello just slowly comes up on the apron and crawls into the ring, stands there in the corner. Well, what's the referee going to do but disqualify him? He's got no business being in there. Mm-hmm. So, the referee rings the bell. He disqualifies them, but it keeps LeDuc and Roy Lee from winning the belts. They win. They got their hands raised, right, but they didn't get the belts. So This is going to play out over some time here, man. These four guys. So World Junior Heavyweight Championship match was next. Wow, Dave, this one, Tony did everything but just win this match outright. He dominated Nelson Royal most of the 60-minute time limit match. And in the last 5 minutes, now they're at 55 minutes. In the last 5 minutes, I watched the match. I bet you Tony Charles did 10 of these throws, phenomenal throws. Again, some I had never seen. And Royal kicked out of every one of them. It was like Royal he was not going to say die. And the announcer starts announcing the time limit. Usually, if you've got a 60-minute match, the announcer says 55 minutes gone, 5 minutes remaining, 4 minutes remaining, 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. The announcer starts counting down the time in the last 5 minutes. So with about 1 minute left in the match, Tony done everything in this 5 minute period of time. He pancaked Nelson Royal. He put a leg out in front of both his feet. He grabbed the back of his neck and he slammed him face first in the mat.
Whoa.
And when he did, he smoothly, man, slipped right into that same torture rack that he'd done to him on TV 6 days earlier. I mean, and the crowd exploded. They saw it coming and they just popped. So, and I never saw a wrestler more determined than Nelson Royal was at this point, man, not to give up.
Wow.
And he was in one of the most painful holds in history. You can't be in a worse hold than this hold. And Nelson Royal, I could see the agony in his body. He was contorted. He was just trying his best not to give up. And they announced 30 seconds remaining. He's still in that hold. 10 seconds remaining. He's still in that hold. And the referee can't raise his hands because Tony is holding both of his hands. So it looked like to me with 10 seconds left in the match, his body collapsed. I thought he passed out. And, so then, the bell rang. Boom. And when the bell rang, Tony thought that it was over. And Tony released his hold, man. He leaped up in the air, man. The crowd erupted. And but the referee didn't leave Nelson. And when Nelson was laying there, the referee reached and got his hand, and he raised his hand off the mat. I don't even know if the crowd was noticing it. He raised his hand off the mat, and when he let go of it, Nelson held his hand up. Then it dropped on the mat. But right then, he rang the bell again, and he called it a time limit draw because Royal was still conscious. He still was able to fight. So it was one of the greatest matches I'd ever seen. It was just unbelievable. Wow, it was just phenomenal. And the fans were so into it that they came and got Tony off of the apron of the ring, and they put him on their shoulders and they carried him. A big mob carried him back to the back curtain, man. I mean, it looked like he had won. They were celebrating like he had won. It was a phenomenal match, So my match with Harley, it had everything in it, basically. It had a lot of wrestlings in the early part of it. And toward the end of it, it was definitely Harley's type of deal. It was all a brawl at the end. And the crowd was so into it at the end of the match that you couldn't hear the referee. Even if he was right in your face, if his face was 6 inches from your face and he was screaming as loud as he could, you couldn't hear what he was saying. It was that loud in the building. And, and I'd gone for my leg lock several times, many times in the early part of the match. And each time I did, the building would stand up, man. There'd be a big roar. They knew if I got it, it was done. And Harley was a tremendous defensive wrestler, and he was a smart wrestler too. He realized that if I ever got that hold, his reign as world champion was done. So, and it was that effective. I mean, nobody ever broke it. Nobody got out of it. You couldn't get out of it. So finally, at about the 45-minute mark, after focusing off and on for the last 30 minutes on working his right leg. I just kept working his right leg, trying to get the hold. He would get out of the ring. He would limp off into the crowd. He was starting to kill time because I was really getting him. So then about the 45-minute mark, he sent me into the ropes and he bent over. He was just going to give me a simple backdrop. And I tried everything to get the toe hold that night. But suddenly, there he was. He was bent over. And he was in the perfect position for me. So I just leaped over him. And, and I spun around, man. I shot my right leg between his legs. I hooked the grapevine. I reached down there, grabbed his ankle. I rolled him backwards. And by God, I had the Fuller leg lock on Harley Race with 15 minutes left in the match. And, it was so fast. It not only caught him off guard, it caught the thousands of people in the stands off guard. And then once they realized that I had it, they exploded. It was like, wow, he's got it. They'd never seen me get it that way.
Wow.
I had never done it that way.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think Harley was prepared for it to happen that way either. So when I rolled him, which I always did as part of the hold. Once you got the ankle, I rolled forward, and it took him backwards. It put him fairly close to the ropes. But I thought he was still going to be far enough away. We're both on our back. You can't hardly drag yourself when two guys are laying on their backs.
Right.
You can't. Your arms don't work that way.
Yeah.
So, but he ended up closer to the ropes than I thought. So I'm laying on my back. And when I got this hold on people, I can't look up and see where he's at because I can't see over my legs and his legs. And, I'm in a very awkward position to see exactly where he is.
Yeah.
But he's fighting. He's fighting it, and he's trying to drag himself to get to the rope. And all I knew, man, at this point is I had my hold, man. And I was just yanking on that right leg, man, as hard and as often as possible. All I was thinking about was the 10 pounds of gold, man. And he was much closer to the ropes than I thought. And I finally managed to get back to where he finally drug himself back to where he could reach the bottom rope. But I didn't know it. I couldn't see him holding the bottom rope. Mm-hmm. And the referee was right there constantly in his face before he got to the bottom rope, asking him if he gave up, And, man, he was just like Nelson Royal. He was not about to give up, man. And he was, so then the roar of the crowd was so loud, I couldn't hear anything, man. So he got back to where he could get one hand on the rope. That's all he needed to get a break. But I can't see it. I don't know. The crowd's so loud, I can't hear the referee. The referee's in his face, He's asking him if he breaks it. Once he sees him touch the rope, he comes to my face, and he starts screaming to me to break. And I think that Harley's given up. I think he's given it up. But I'm not going to take a chance, so I just kept cranking that leg, and he started counting, the referee. And he counted. I closed my eyes when he came the first time, and said that you got to let him go. You got to let him go. I closed my eyes. Oh. He started counting. I didn't even recognize and realize that the referee's counting. And so then he was about to break out. Harley had made it to the ropes. He began to count over top of me. I didn't see it because my eyes were closed. All I could think of was, if you keep this hold and you keep cranking that pain to him, he's going to give up. My senses, I got to tell you, man, like it happens in every one of these long, grueling matches, your senses get dull because you expend so much energy during the match. You've run out of air, and just the sheer elation with the fact that I got my toehold on the world champion and I'm going to beat him right here. So the referee continued to count. My eyes still closed. And I continued to crank the hold, man. And Harley continued to scream. I could hear him screaming above the crowd. And the referee told me later that Harley was in such pain, he was begging for the referee to make me break the hold.
Wow.
Begging for it.
Yep.
So I finally opened my eyes, man, and I'm still jerking on Harley's leg. And just in time to see the referee standing over top of me. And he swings his arm. And he must have screamed 5, but I couldn't hear. No way I could hear what number he was on. Yeah. I'd not seen him count any of those. And then the ref signaled to the timekeeper to ring the bell. I thought I won the world championship. I got up, man. I was going crazy. I got to my feet. I raised my hand. The crowd was already roaring. And Jesus, when that happened, they were just like me. They thought I would win, and they just started. They just took all that roaring to a different level. It was pandemonium in there. I was jumping all over the ring and going crazy. The referee went and got the belt. And I went toward him because I thought it was mine. And instead, he walked right past me and he went to Harley, who was still laying by the ropes and holding his right leg. So basically, I went instantly from being the new world champion to being the world chump. I'd been disqualified for not breaking a hold that should have made me world champion. You know, the ref raised Harley's hand, man. I fell down on my knees. That crowd went silent. Like, oh my God.
Wow.
What happened? You know?
Yeah.
And then the announcer told everyone that I had failed to release the hold when the champion was in the ropes. I'd been counted out and was disqualified. And I don't think I need to describe what the crowd did at that point, Dave.
Well, I mean, that's unbelievable. I'm surprised there wasn't a riot. So what did you do at that point?
Well, man, you know, I was kind of stunned, man, and I did the only thing a decent wrestler could do, man. I'd made the biggest mistake of my wrestling career. All I could do was take it like a man. So, you know, I hung my head. I left the ring, and I was met there at the apron by a mob of fans, man. And they had already accepted what I couldn't accept. They had already, you know, and they were just patting me and congratulating me for a fantastic match. And I think they tried their best to make me feel better about what had just happened to me, man. They followed me, a mob of them, to the black curtain back there. And
yeah. And to me, you're the hometown baby face. But I guess the real question, and I'm not surprised by that, their reaction. But so what did Harley Race do?
Well, I'll tell you what, he did nothing, basically. He had to be carried from the ring on a stretcher.
Whoa.
And he was holding his right leg the entire way. I looked back to see just what was going on. And all I could see was him with his hand over his right leg, his knee area, and his belt was laid across his body.
Wow.
Everybody in the building was booing him, man, at the top of their lungs. Man, they carried him out to, the loudest boos I ever heard.
Holy cow, what a night so far. I mean, but still, it wasn't over. That was not the main event. So how did it end with Bob Armstrong and Don Carson, the NWA non-sanctioned lights out loser leaves Southeastern match? That was the last event of the night, right?
Had to be.
Yes.
I mean, it's a non-sanctioned lights out match. It has to go on last. They have to darken the building. They have to raise the house lights. They have to announce that it is not sanctioned by the NWA. There's a sequence that has to happen for these NWA lights out matches. So it had to be the last match of the night. So, and Bob Armstrong, wow, when they rang that bell, he was like a man possessed. He never let Don Carson have anything during the match. There was no wrestling, not one wrestling move involved. Bob started jacking jaws from the very bell, and wow, he never quit. You know, and it wasn't quite as bloody as the week before, because this time Bob didn't bleed, but boy, poor old Don Carson bled, man. Wow, it was horrible. Bob set that crowd on fire, man. You know, and he was taking it to Don like he was almost angry about what had happened to me in the match right before his. You know, and he did something in that match that had only been done one time before to Carson in his entire career. He took Don Carson's glove off and he used it against him. And I had done that in the summer of 1976, the only person to ever take Carson's glove off and use it on him. And that's what Bob did. So not only did he start out like a house of fire, he finally got his glove, he loaded it up, he destroyed Don Carson, to the point that Carson was bloody, just a bloody mess, and just laying there. And I think Bob could have pinned him 10 times, but he wanted to just bury him, man. So while Bob's so totally focused on destroying him, this big dude, this big guy in the first row of ringside, he jumps out of his seat and he runs up to the ring. He crawls up on the apron. He reached down in his pocket and he pulled out a Raskin mask. and he put it on his head.
Uh-oh.
And then everybody in the building realized who he was.
Are you kidding?
He'd been sitting on the front row. Nobody knows what the assassin looked like. Nobody ever pulled his mask off.
Right.
He sat there all night. He wasn't booked on that card, just to make sure for this moment if it happened. And so he put that mask on. He stepped in the ring. He reached in the other pocket. He put his loaded whatever he puts in his mask, and then he just like the week before, Bob's got his back to him, just like the week before, just finishing off Don Carson, and he comes and he caught Bob, man. He found the back of Bob Armstrong's head again with a big headbutt, man. And then he caught him under the arm, spun him around, headbutted him in the forehead again. He dropped him down, man, like a bad habit. He pulled Don Carson's glove off of Bob's hand, and he placed Carson on top of Bob. Because it was an NWA non-sanctioned match with no rules, he stood there and forced the referee to count Bob out. To count out one of the greatest stars in Southeastern history. He basically sent Armstrong packing.
Wow. Holy cow. Okay, so how did he and Don Carson get out of there alive?
Well, I tell you, this is pretty strange too, man. Well, obviously they needed a brigade of policemen, and luckily the policemen were really good there. And they realized, that this is going to be horrible. We got to do something. So they came to the ring, and they got there pretty quickly. And then, luckily, nobody knew this until this night. In the Coliseum, there was a quick way for heels to get back to their dressing room without having to go to the back of the building and get to that black curtain. Okay, so about 100 feet from the ring, when you got out on the side of the building where the heels dressing room was, right behind one section of the ringside, there was a small section of the ringside because it was on the side of the building. There was a side door entrance directly into the heels dressing room. And Carson and the assassin, they knew it, and they headed that way. And the police, unaware of the room, they followed them. They had to escort them, so they followed them. I don't think, other than that, there would have been any way they'd ever made it to the back of that building.
No, I can't see it. That's an absolutely incredible night, Ron. So you had to have a huge crowd there. What was it like?
Well, I kind of want to give everybody a closer look than just the attendance on this one. The attendance was 6,100. Now, that was 200 short of that record crowd in April, which was 6,300, okay, of that same year. That was the Coliseum's number. I still think it was more than that, but the Coliseum, again, that was their number, 6,100. And because we didn't have a fire marshal on that record-setting night in April back in the Coliseum, the city made sure this time we had a fire marshal. There was one there this time. So the matches started about 15 minutes late because we held up because of the size of the crowd who was still in the lobby trying to buy tickets. And then tickets were cut off before 9 o'clock. So managers of the building, I asked them later how many they think got turned away. They thought somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 got turned away that couldn't get a ticket. And on this event, there was a price increase because it was a world title night. So the first 3 rows of ringside was that golden circle that I had started doing way back, the 2 championship matches earlier. And, I charged $10 for the first 3 rows of ringside. The remaining 1,600 ringside seats, Dave, so there was about 2,000 total ringside seats.
Wow.
1,600 of those seats were $8
right
each. The first balcony had 1,000 seats, a little over 1,000 seats. They were $7 each. The general admission seats were $5 for an adult and $3 for a child. The gross house was almost $38,000, close to $38,000. And that would be in today's money over $171,000 in 1977.
Well, you should have kept it.
Boy,
Yeah,
I'll tell you,
yeah.
that stuff gets away from you real quick. That
Yeah.
money stuff.
It has a tendency. Yes, it does.
But wow, it was a phenomenal evening in more ways than just one.
That's incredible. And really, the $10 for that golden circle, it doesn't sound like that big a deal for 2 championship matches. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you got to think too, now, but you got to think the 38,000 is 4 times. That would have been $40 a ticket.
Yeah, nowadays, yeah.
Equal to $40 a ticket. Yeah. So
Yeah.
but the crazy thing about it is the first 3 rows were the first tickets sold, and they're all gone.
Oh,
first.
wow. Yeah. This has been a fascinating Studcast, Ron. It looks like we may have to save today's learning tree question for next week. On Facebook, folks, to become friends with the Stud, go to Ron Fuller Tennessee Stud page or the author Ron Fuller Welch page. Simply follow him on either of those pages, and you become friends with a legend. On Twitter, it's Ron Fuller Welch, and you can follow him there also. And go to Ron's website, tnstud.com. Find everything related to the Stud, all Studcast, all Super Studcast, the Stud Store with all kinds of souvenirs, and Dinner with the Stud tickets as well. His fantastic Brutus novel, even autographed, and more at tnstud.com. And don't forget to subscribe now, if you haven't already, to Ron's new home, Southeastern Rewind, on YouTube. Ring that bell and get the best in old school wrestling. We'll ring your bell every time something new is added. Okay, so where do we ride next week, Stud?
Well, obviously, things are beginning to change in Southeastern. You have these big events. You've prepared for them. You've got guys leaving, guys coming, new talents arriving. Great stars like Bob Armstrong are leaving. We're going to get into all that in the next Studcast. And as I remember from earlier in the show today, that learning tree question that we're not getting to today is going to take us in the direction of finding out what's coming up. So, we're going to really get into that next week. We're going to continue on into the fall of 1977. We've got the great Thunderbolt Patterson, one of the great black wrestlers of all time.
Wow.
Makes his debut in Southeastern. The Irish sensation from a few weeks back from the tournament, Pat Barrett, is going to return, and much more. So, I want to thank everybody again for your support. Without you, obviously, there'd be no Studcast, no Super Studcast, no Southeastern Rewind or YouTube channel. I do this. I basically do this for fans because you've been so good to me, man. So, all of you, please take care of yourselves and others, and may God bless us all.
For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.